what are we supposed to do when we find ourselves in a really tough situation where we feel defeated, we feel like we've tried everything and just don't know where to turn next? I have talked to so many people this year that all seem to be going through their own type of challenging situation. Whether it's in regards to their job, maybe they hate their job, maybe they're not fully fulfilled with their work, maybe they're in a tough romantic relationship that's just not really working for them, maybe it's even super complicated because they have kids, maybe it's a financial issue, perhaps you have a health issue, perhaps you have a major rift with a friend, or you have pretty much seemingly everything, but are still not totally happy and are making life more difficult on yourself. Now, it could be any of those things, but usually when we take inventory of our lives, there's usually one area at least that just doesn't seem to be working as well. And maybe we've had the same pattern or the same thing happen over and over again throughout our whole life, and we feel like we've tried everything and I don't know what to do next. Well, if you're in that type of situation, know that you're not alone and that you're right there with me, because I'm going through one of those situations right now. 2018 has been a challenging year for me, all things considered. And I guess I'm just going to go ahead and share with you. I know most people wouldn't usually share something that they are currently going through because it's pretty vulnerable. And I know people usually like to tell stories once they found themselves transformed on the other side. But, I get that life happens in real time and we're all going through things. And, I'm a really big advocate for authenticity and openness and vulnerability. And the reason being, I think in this instance, why I feel inclined to share here today is because it's super therapeutic. I think this episode is going to be pretty therapeutic for me to kind of let you know where I'm at and to just let myself flow and share it. But it's also great in terms of understanding each other. If we know what's going on in each other's lives, we can better understand each other, better empathize, as well as know how to best support each other if we know what's actually going on below the surface when, someone, I guess in this case me, has the courage to share something that they're going through. And then the third thing is just to feel like we're not alone. I know with living in this age of digital humanity and social media, we're seeing people's highlight reels, and it's really not fair to ourselves if we're comparing our lives to other people's highlight reels. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you kind of why 2018 has been pretty challenging for me. 3 years ago, I took a massive leap of faith, and I left my lucrative 12-year career at Showtime Networks to start this podcast and to really stand for what I believe in. And I alluded to it a little bit before, but I'm a firm believer that if we are living an authentic life, we're going to be more happy and fulfilled. If we're authentic, we're going to connect more deeply and more meaningfully with others, and we're going to really live a life of purpose. So I felt like there was a need for that when I left my job 3 years ago at Showtime, and I still to this date I think that there's such a need for that in this world that is a little lost right now. With social media, we're more connected than ever, yet perhaps more disconnected than ever. Their loneliness rates are at an all-time high. We're living in a fake news world. People who seemingly have it all, like Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, are taking their own lives. And so I think the importance of authenticity is really important. And it's been absolutely amazing in the last 3 years. With this show, we've reached over 200,000 people. I've personally had the incredible opportunity to coach over 150 people through my coaching programs. I've had the opportunity to connect with many of you, whether via email or on social media. And if we're Facebook friends, we've probably connected at some point because you've received one of my personalized video messages on your birthday. And it's been really an incredible, rewarding experience. I have grown so much, and I'm just, elated for all the opportunities that I've had, doing this podcast every single week, giving my TEDx talk, etc. And having said all of those things, I've also worked 80 hours a week, and I've really been working my ass off to create a formula where my work is incredibly impactful and valuable for others, that it is rewarding and fulfilling for me, as well as financially lucrative, as well as allowing me to live the lifestyle that I want to live. I'm very passionate about this cause, as you can tell, just in my voice here. But working 80-hour weeks for 3 years has been incredibly challenging. And while some stuff has certainly worked in terms of, putting out this podcast, the fact that you're listening right now shows that this podcast is valuable and it's working. But at the same time, it feels like most of the opportunities that have come my way have been a result of me working so incredibly hard versus doing my best to position myself and Are You Being Real and the work in the most valuable, entertaining way where more people are naturally finding it, more opportunities, speaking opportunities and stuff are landing on my lap. And it feels like that flow just hasn't really sunk up. And I feel like I have tried a lot. I've pivoted a lot to kind of find that secret sauce or that magic ingredient that would allow for more people to find this work and to benefit from it. And while it's touched a lot of people, it hasn't. I still have been overworking, and still it hasn't been as lucrative or even as close to lucrative as I wish it could be. So that's where I found myself just a couple of months ago, and it's been a tough year. Because on one hand, I feel like I'm giving it my all and I'm so proud of myself. And then on the other end, the results just don't seem to really be matching up, at least for what I believe the effort and love that I'm putting into everything. So, having said all that, I burnt out. I totally burnt out. I was absolutely exhausted, and I was super duper ready to get away. And as a coach, how would I coach somebody else? I would say, take a second, put your computer down, step away, take a break, catch some air, and create some space. So that's exactly what I did. And I had this really amazing opportunity to go on a 3-week adventure. So I went to a few Greek islands, spent 9 days there with my girlfriend, and then I went to Israel for 12 days. And I had the incredibly good fortune on going on a leadership trip that was from the Schusterman Foundation that brought together 50 leading storytellers from around the globe to come together to experience Israel, to come together to share stories, to master our storytelling, to explore what it means to be a leader, and to get to experience Israel and to be educated on the state of affairs there and the conflict. The Schusterman Foundation is a really cool foundation that is, out to make a positive impact in the world, as well as to, work with the most creative minds in the world to bring some hope and perhaps new ideas to such a dire and scary and real conflict that is occurring in the Middle East, in the land of Israel, if you want to call it Israel, or Palestine today. So I just wanted to take a quick second to do my best to educate you on the current conflict that is going on today in Israel. But first, this is a conflict that goes back from really the beginning of time as we know it. It is an incredibly holy land. That's why they call it the Holy Land. But it is incredibly holy for Jews, for Muslims, and Christians, and kind of leadership of the land has changed time and time again over the course of history. Jews lived there back in the days of Abraham and Isaac, those biblical days. Moses led the Jews back free from slavery, and it's just changed hands so many times. And over the course of the last several hundred years, it's been a huge home for Muslims as well. So in terms of the conflict today, there's war there right now. There's Jews living freely in the land of Israel. And then there are a number, hundreds of thousands, or I think actually millions now, of Palestinians that are living in refuge in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. So quick story on Israel. Like I said, I'm not a historian. I'm going to try to give you the Cliff Notes versions here. But in 1948, after the end of the Holocaust, when 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, the United Nations decided to award the land that is today Israel to the Jewish people. Before that, it was run by a British mandate. And to kind of paint a picture of what it was like living in the land in the early 1900s, it was mostly a bunch of tribes living independently. So there wasn't a central leadership. The Brits kind of had the mandates. They were there occupying the space, but it was a lot of like little independent people and tribes living around the space. Many Jews escaped the Holocaust and kind of came to Israel. So that's kind of when Jews started coming back after being exiled for hundreds of years. And from my understanding, there was about 750,000 Arab Palestinians living in that land. But like I said, there wasn't a centralized government. It was mostly independent tribes. So Holocaust ends. The United Nations decides to give this British mandate to the Jewish people. In 1948, in May, the Jews declare the state of Israel to be the home of the Jewish people, and which is followed by a little war, probably a very big war. I'm just using that word. And a lot of the Palestinian Arabs who had been living there went into refuge during the war, figuring that they'd win the war, and then after the war, they'd be able to come back into their homes. Well, to their surprise, the Jewish Israeli state prevailed, and people have been living in exile ever since. So Jewish people currently occupy the most of the state of Israel, living freely. And then there is the Gaza Strip, and there is the West Bank, where there are millions of Palestinians living in refuge. And they both feel like they have a claim and a rightful claim to the land after, the Holocaust and Jews having been exiled and come back and forth from Israel for so many years and losing so many people in the Holocaust. It's certainly, you can empathize with the Jewish people in terms of having a safe place to live. And then you can certainly empathize as well with the Palestinian people for being pushed out of their homes and being exiled now for the last 70 years. So I had a decent awareness of the situation upon going back to Israel, and I honestly didn't know how I was going to feel returning to Israel. Now, I had been there 3 times as a kid, but it had been 18 years. And today, I've been kind of detached from my Jewish religious heritage, and I think it's really important to have faith, which gives hope and maybe a code of values to which to live by. But to me, that doesn't necessarily have to look at religion. And when I look at religion, I know this is very general, but there have been holy wars since the beginning of religion. And part of me just hoped and didn't understand on a deep, kind of hopeful, optimistic level why the Israelis and the Palestinians couldn't coexist together in a peaceful 2-state solution. Now, the Schusterman Foundation did a beautiful job of really showing both sides and telling the stories in the most objective way possible. And we learned from a lot of leading journalists and just from real everyday people coming in and sharing their perspectives, so we could really, empathize, with people from kind of both representations. Anywho, what we learned, and one of the things we learned, is the majority of Israelis would love to no longer live in a war state and would like to have some sort of peace agreement and are open to a 2-state, essentially, peace agreement. And the majority of Palestinians living in refuge would also love to live in a peaceful 2-state agreement. Now, where the challenge is there within is that neither side really trusts one another. The Israelis fear that if they agree to a 2-state solution, that the Palestinian people will want more of the land and eventually take over the whole land. And the Palestinian people feel like a 2-state solution, that the Jews will continue to hold them in refuge, and that the situation really will never change. So that's kind of the situation there. And from my understanding, both sides feel like they've kind of tried everything and are doing their best. And there's really no apparent solution. So I wanted to, thank the Schusterman Foundation for educating and bringing me there to kind of, being able to experience it. And, it made me think and really connect to my drive for making the world a better place and for continuing to be creative in the way that I think, because there's always more opportunities and solutions that we can explore. Together with it really brought to me the war within. I think that this conflict in Israel, Palestinian, it's really no different than a lot of land. I mean, if we look at America, for example, there were indigenous people that lived here when the Americans came, and then they were pushed out and killed and tortured. And this is really no different from so many places around the world. This has been happening since the beginning of time. People claiming land, conquering it, killing others, pushing, proselytizing religion, whatever it may be. But to me, this is really a symbol as well of the war within each of ourselves. And while I am so fortunate to live in the United States, where I feel free to be myself, I'm not worried about my safety. Funny enough, I didn't actually feel I felt totally safe physically in Israel as well. But it really shined a light on the war within. And we did an episode on kind of the war within, our light versus our dark last week on the show. But there's always that yin and the yang that's kind of balancing our good wolf versus our bad wolf, as we described in the podcast. And, I was just thinking about all the incredible abundance and good fortune that I have in my life, yet I still suffer. And that's what this episode is kind of about, is about the war within and what we're supposed to do when we find ourselves in these tough situations where we feel like we've tried everything and just don't know what to do. So there I am in Israel. I've kind of given you like a general lay of the land, but it was a very intense experience for me. It was so much fun. It was so cool to be able to tour around and see all these awesome historical places and to get educated on the conflict. But I also really went into this trip hoping to get clarity on my next big idea, to try to make my work more accessible. So there would be that flow where I'd maybe find that little subtle shift that would allow more people to find the podcast or more speaking engagements or just that next big thing that would allow this all to take off. So I was looking for clarity, creativity to really tap into that. I also wanted to really connect deeply with the other storytellers on the trip to learn from them, as well as be in contribution, because I know that when I'm in contribution, things naturally begin to flow my way. When you put all that together, it was kind of an equal balance between lots of existential thought, lots of headiness, together with a lot of play as well. So I was really hoping to get some answers during that trip, and they didn't all come to me at one point, but I must say, I have never been so close to giving up and to quitting on this mission. Feeling like just exhausted, beat up, feeling like it's just never going to work, and kind of wondering, should I get into real estate? And whenever I go there, I just know that in my heart that I can't give up, that this is what I'm here to do. And I definitely called myself crazy a little bit, that my heart's mission is to create social change in the world. That is a high order right there. That's not an easy thing. What does that look like? How do you create social change? But for me, that's my calling. And I know it's a little bit crazy, but I guess anyone who's created social change in the past is probably a little bit crazy too. So that was something. And I also had this big revelation of how hard I tend to make things. So I have a career that's built on two things that people avoid like the plague, and that is vulnerability and accountability. And in my opinion, they're two things that can help us out so much. I've alluded to vulnerability, the importance of being able to express, to connect with others, to get the support that you need, that vulnerability is actually a strength that can bring us together and make us feel less alone. Then we've got accountability, which I think we can gain a lot of freedom through accountability because it helps us stay on point, staying on ground and on vision to what we want most in the world, helps us live our core values and being the person that we've always strived to be. So I'm a firm believer in that, but I've also noticed in my last 3 years of work that people avoid those things and, kind of making me realize that I can't just package my services as vulnerability and accountability support, that I really need to meet people where they're at. And here I was in Israel, racking my brain, trying to come up with whatever that next project would be, where all the dots would connect. And I wasn't really getting the clarity. So that's kind of where I was on this trip, looking for answers, kind of having this crazy existential crisis. Then at the same time, having this strange reconnection to my Jewish roots and my cultural heritage. So that's where I was at. But let's pause the story right now and kind of go back to, to you. So as I mentioned, we've all had these types of tough situations where we just don't know what to do, where we feel frustrated and defeated. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to continue to have hope? Or maybe you're not feeling yourself in this kind of situation. Maybe you are flowing right now and all the power to you. Share some of those good vibes our way. But how can you support others who might be going through a tough time? So through my experience reading and researching, from coaching hundreds of people, through just the best advice I could give myself, this is the list of things that I came up with. So I'm going to share this list of 10 things with you. And as I go through the list, I'm going to share basically what my personal takeaway is and how I'm applying it. So the first thing that I think is incredibly important is to take responsibility for your life. So for me, it is taking responsibility for all the choices that I've made in the last number of years that have led me to this point, right? To burnout. I'm the one who chose to leave my corporate job to pursue this mission. I'm the one who chose to work 80 hours, to keep working when things weren't working versus step away. So I take responsibility for that. And it's important to take responsibility because then we feel like we're in a place of power. There's a phenomenal book. We're talking about, the Holocaust a little bit, but Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he was in Auschwitz, and he had this awareness that even though he was technically enslaved living in a concentration camp, that no one could take away his freedom of thought, his freedom to be happy. And with that perspective, that it doesn't matter what our external circumstances and situations are, as long as we take responsibility for our own happiness, for our own well-being, that we are in the driver's seat of our lives. So for me, I'm taking responsibility for the choices that I've made, and I'm happy about that. The second piece is accepting where you're at right now. You're where you're at right now, and you can either accept it or you can fight it. So I'm grateful to be in this place. I'm kind of choosing to look at it from the perspective that I'm exactly where I need to be right now. With so much uncertainty, there's actually more opportunity. As I mentioned, that I was the closest that I've been in 3 years to walking away from this whole thing. I don't know how else to describe it, thing that I've built over the last 3 years. And by giving myself that freedom, that really anything is possible in terms of what I want to build next within this context here. So that is a second, really accepting where you're at. And I am accepting where I am at. And I am so committed to being gentle with myself for the rest of the summer. I'm giving myself the rest of the summer to basically turn down the volume a little bit, to chill out and to enjoy myself. So that's what I'm committed to there. And as it pertains to this podcast, I don't know if we're going to be releasing new episodes every single week. If it feels in flow for me, we'll give you awesome new interviews every single week, maybe some more shares from me. But we're also going to do some mashup episodes, some of the episodes we found to be most valuable from the past 176 episodes. Together with some mashups. So that's what you can expect with Are You Being Real for the rest of the summer here. The next is to really just get back down to the basics and identify your basic needs. There's so much stuff going on in our lives. So when we've got a challenging situation, it's important just to get back to the basics. So what are the things that you actually need, and what are the things that are just creating more noise? So for me, the basics are just connecting with my family, with my closest friends, with doing things that excite me, having fun. I'm going to be Airbnb-ing my house to earn some income this summer, which also allow me to travel a little bit. So that's how I'm going to be kind of financing it. So that's kind of the third one, which is going back to your basic needs. The next is really seeing outside of your own perspective. We get lost in our own train of thoughts, and I think it's really important to be able to look at yourself from like a macro kind of airplane level perspective. In the book, You're a Badass by Jen Sincero, she has this kind of cool way of exercise of doing that, where she says to pretend that you're an alien coming down from outer space that inhabits your body. And the only thing they're getting access to is what's there. So the choices that you've made in your life, whether maybe it's your career, maybe it's like taking inventory of your relationships and your situation, without all the additional emotional power that we apply to all these kind of objective facts in our life. And she says, if you're an alien inheriting your body, what would you do? So I think that that's a great way to start. It's kind of maybe a little woo-woo for you, but I think that that's really interesting, and that's helped me basically see what's working and what I can catapult off of. To me, that's continuing to create awesome content over time, because we've done so much content, using the content that we already have, splicing and dicing it, repositioning it in ways that perhaps might be more entertaining or more valuable for you, or might be more accessible for others, together with really, really exploring my love for authentic connection and kind of fighting some of the loneliness and issues that we're facing today as a society with social media and digital addiction. So really, the possibilities are endless. If we see outside of our own perspective, we can realize that there are infinite opportunities. So when we think we've tried everything, I assure you there's things that you haven't tried. So allow yourself to get creative and to continue to be expansive in your exploration, which I am really enjoying doing right now. The next thing is trusting your intuition. Something that is so incredibly valuable. I think that I was just so engrossed in my situation that I kind of didn't even know what my intuition was. I was constantly seeking counsel from others and letting my opinion and decisions be swayed based off every person that I talk to. So I don't know if you relate to that, but that's something that I've done. And I've been really focusing on meditating more and tuning into my intuition and trusting my intuition, and kind of following that and letting my intuition be my guide. And I'm kind of excited right now. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in a week. I might travel. I might still be here in Venice, but I'm really kind of going with the flow and trusting my heart and that voice, tuning out some of the noise and really following my authentic truth. So I encourage you, wherever you may be, to really tune into your intuition. The next one is focusing on the process, not the result. I know I get fixated on the result. Maybe it's a certain number of listeners for the podcast, a certain amount of money for a speaking gig, or so forth. But focusing on the process is what we can control. It's a lot tougher to control the results. And oftentimes, the results don't tune out, the exact way we want. And so it's all about the journey, not just the destination. And what I'm finding that when I focus on the results that I'm seeking, it's impacting the most amount of people, then I might be skipping some of the steps along the journey that can create the impact that I ultimately want to create. And something that has been really, that I'm really attuned to right now is creating on-ramps and really meeting people where they're at. So I want to give you an example. This is something that came up for me in a conversation that I had when talking about feminism with someone. And I know that a lot of time as a man, that if I am met by someone who considers themselves to be a feminist, I totally understand why they'd be as passionate as they are, and gender equality. We have a long way to go there. But what I've personally found is that a lot of time, the way the message will be delivered, perhaps from a feminist, is delivered and packaged in a way that a man has a tough time absorbing. And for me, I don't want to take responsibility for all the other men in the world. I know how I treat women, and I do my best to value women. I often put women on a pedestal. But the reason why I share this is because I think there's an on-ramp in this instance for men to be able to get educated on the situation, on the inequalities, in a way that they don't feel like the finger is being pointed at them. Well, in my case, with my work and accountability and vulnerability and the impact I want to make, I'm really learning what can I do right now to meet people where they're at, to support them in getting maybe more vulnerable and connected with people that have touched them, accountability as well to live the life they want to live in a way that doesn't feel, self-helpy, but it is really just a smooth process that is helping transition us there. So to me, it's all about focusing on the journey and the process versus just focusing and getting ahead of myself on the outcome. The next piece is straight up gratitude. And we've talked about gratitude a lot on the show. There's always an opportunity to be grateful for something. And my trip to Israel really, really shined a light on how lucky I am to be alive. I went to the Holocaust Museum in Israel, and it's a place that I had been a few times with my parents and brother and sister and grandparents back when I was a teenager. But going through the Holocaust Museum in Israel, which is this Jewish state, I was so grateful that my ancestors escaped Europe before World War II, which gave me the chance to even be alive when 6 million Jews were not so fortunate. So to be alive is incredible, together with the incredible life that my family, my parents, my grandparents worked so hard to give me, to live this free, beautifully abundant life here, which now has me giving this podcast. How cool is that? There's so many people around the world that don't have access to clean water, that are fearing for their safety and their shelter all the time. So there's always an opportunity to be grateful. And I'm certainly realizing that all my problems, all of my suffering and challenges, they're real, but they're also relative. So when I check in with that, it's also very, very valuable. Next thing is to not take yourself so seriously. I've definitely found myself in an existential crisis over the last number of months. And while I think it's important to be in the question about what our purpose is, I think there's, a balance in that, not to get lost in that, and not to take everything so seriously. So for me, I am so committed to having fun. I'm a firm believer that things don't have to be hard. Yes, we have to work for things, but when we're feeling a lot of resistance in a relationship, let's not fight fire with fire. And for me, that's stepping away and allowing myself to get back to the basics, as I mentioned, have some fun, enjoy myself, and not take things too seriously. There's always another pivot. So like I said, if you've tried something, there's always more options, but just if something's that important to you, don't give up. You can give up. You can walk away if that feels like it's your authentic truth, but there's always additional pivots. And that is something that I'm excited to pivot into. I came up with a really exciting idea on this trip that I'm not ready to share with you yet because it's just 2 weeks old and we're just fleshing it out. But I am proud to say that there's another pivot in the works that I think is going to be the biggest project that I've ever taken on. And I'm really excited to do it because I think it will really work to solve some of these loneliness issues and disconnection and superficiality in social media and allow us to actually connect with the people that are important to us, that have touched our lives. So more on that soon. And then lastly, really winning, being successful is so much more than a result or maybe dollars in your bank account or, being the one person that's victorious. For me, winning and success is really choosing happiness, being happy, putting my best foot forward in any given moment, creating value, supporting others, and just doing my best in every given moment. So that to me is my little formula. So I hope that you found some juice there, some wisdom, valuable to you in whatever situation that you find yourself in now or may find yourself in the future. So as I mentioned, I've been back now in the United States from that epic 3-week adventure for about 2 weeks. I've had some good days. I've had some bad days, where I've been hard on myself or scared because there's so much up in the air. I really don't know exactly what's going to happen next. I have this idea that I'm going to pursue, but I got to admit, I've been knocked down a lot of times and I'm scared that the next thing, might yield the exact same results and might be good, but not good enough, which is kind of a narrative that I found repeating itself in my head so many times over the course of my life. Putting my best effort forward, it makes some sort of impact, but it's not enough. So that's something that I am really committed to, working on and breaking that pattern. And I'm just excited to be back. I'm grateful for all the incredible people in my life who I continue to run into, who are beautiful mirrors to me. And, just love having deep, meaningful conversations with them. And everything's up in the air. I might travel next week. But I'm excited to be where I'm at. Other little tidbit, I broke up with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, so that's also a new thing for me. But like I said, I'm really happy to be where I'm at. And thank you for all of your love and support along this journey for me, because I wouldn't be who I am or doing what I'm doing without you and your love and support. So I am grateful for you. I feel very loved and supported at the moment. So don't worry about me. What I would love from you is just your continued support and cheering me on in this journey and doing your part and being open and honest, both with yourself and the people in your life, standing for what you believe in. Because to me, that is really the ingredient for happiness, as well as forward progress in this world for a more connected, authentic, peaceful world.